the second biggest online cigar retailer in Germany, and now he is taking his knowledge into the cannabis world as the head of international relations for BOVEDA, the global leader in two-way humidity control. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Benjamin Patock.
Thank you, man. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Before we start, can I maybe use you for a quick survey? Who of you actually knows or uses BOVEDA by any chance? Okay, quite a few people, but lots of potential, which I love a lot, giving the specs of this talk. BOVEDA, we basically only do one thing, but this we do to perfection. We would regulate the inside, the humidity on the inside of any given container to a constant level of humidity. And we do this for a myriad of use cases, cannabis being an obvious one, otherwise we would not be here today. But we also do it for tobacco, hence, go one slide back. Sorry, go one slide back. The title of my talk today. So, and we basically only have one product, and you see it right there. So it's that little pouch. We have it in different sizes and different RH levels for a myriad of cases, as I said. We also do it for musical instruments, just as guitars, violins, because, they're made out of wood. So if wood is exposed to changing humidity levels, they would expand or contract, and you don't want that. We also do it for medical devices that actually go inside of the human body. So you see we have a product that's actually very reliable and very safe. At the same time, inexpensive, because we have the very modest goal of being present wherever flower is present. So we want to work with multinationals at the same time as we do want to work with consumers around the globe. Here are some of the companies that we do work with, some of which you probably know, some of which are here today even. We're right there. We're in the industry for over 20 years. We're around for over 20 years in the cannabis industry for roughly 11 years. About me, I joined the company not that long ago. I was as I was presented, in the premium cigar industry before I founded a company. I look back to a career of an entrepreneur, like 12 plus years. So the last one was a good one. Now one of the biggest online retailers for premium tobacco and cigars. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe the similarities of the industries. I know that the products themselves, they cannot be compared, okay? So tobacco did a lot of terrible things to a lot of people around the globe. When we talk about cigars, it's a little bit different though, because cigars, it's still tobacco and it's still not good for you. So if you have problems with your health or you don't want to lead a healthy lifestyle, you should not smoke at all. That's given. But cigars are really like a lifestyle product. You don't really see people standing outside in the rain, freezing, smoking a big Churchill, for 2.5 hours, because they're addicted to cigar smoking. It's something that you choose to do because you enjoy it. It's a luxury item that you choose to consume, either alone or with a circle of friends, with the luxury of the time that it needs to be, consumed. Yet, it's undoubtedly that this plant has magical powers, and that's why we're all here, right? So I don't want to talk about the differences in the product per se, but how the product is being treated by the stakeholders that are in the marketplace. And there are indeed a lot of similarities that I have, and a lot of challenges that I have been bouncing on and off in my last career, and that I see that could be very well possible in Europe going forward to full legalization, like full recreational usage, full adult usage. And I just want to talk about a bunch of them. One is regulations, because there's not many things that you can be sure of, but one thing that you have to be sure of is that regulators, they will be lazy enough not to come up with a unique idea of how to treat recreational cannabis over here. They will look left and right to other highly regulated industries and we'll see what they can take out of there. And you will then look into tobacco, you look into alcohol, knowing that in Germany, we're probably some of the loosest alcohol regulations that there are in a westernized world. But tobacco, you can bump into a couple of things, and I'll just give you a quick rundown. Advertising. You're not allowed to advertise tobacco products at all, unless they're in a tobacco property or in a retail, store storefront, pretty much. And this could be very much a reality for cannabis products too. Even though they're fully legal, they still have the stigma a little bit attached to it. So it's a very good possibility that you not be allowed, even though we're talking the future here, even though it's 100% legal, you might not be allowed to advertise your product, and you have to incorporate that into your strategy, obviously, when you're coming from abroad. Tobacco products in Germany have a fixed price. That means it doesn't matter if you buy an expensive cigar or a cheap cigar even at a gas station or the super high retail outlet, high-end retail outlet, they're going to have the same price everywhere. And this is because the way of tobacco products, how they're being taxed in Germany, they're taxed on the final retail value towards the consumer. So if this price would be changing, then it would be like a whole mess in the administration. And the way you actually pay the taxes is you would go to a government agency and buy tax stamps up front. So you give all the money that you have to pay on taxes up front to the government and take a little stamps and put them onto the boxes, and then you're allowed to sell it. Is that a possible outcome for cannabis? Could be. We don't know. But this is what is happening to millions and billions of tobacco products all over the European Union every day. Minors, of course, age is an issue with tobacco, and for good reasons, and with cannabis it's going to be the same, no doubt about it. For instance, one thing that you have to keep in mind, if there's going to be e-commerce for cannabis products, what we have now in place in the European Union is like a two-tier age verification system for tobacco products. It means that the age has to be verified, A, before you complete the purchase online, and secondly, upon delivery of the product itself. So there's a two-tier step. TPD2 stands for Tobacco Product Directive number 2. It's a stupid word for something that considers all the packaging that you see. Well, if you look at cigarette packs, you have these nice, shocking images that we have right now. I don't know if you have the same everywhere around the globe. We only have them for a couple of years here. But it really comes down also on what you're allowed to name your product, how to describe a product, because they forbid anything that's related with food when it comes to tobacco. So we work with a company named Nectar of the United States, and if they wanted to add, as of now, come up with a tobacco product that's named Nectar, they would not be allowed to do it. Even though they have the brand registered globally, it's just that because it's a food term. And it even goes to such length as if you have a pipe tobacco that's flavored with vanilla, you'll not be allowed to say the word vanilla on the packaging, even though it has vanilla in it. But it's a food-related term, so you will not be allowed to do it. And TPD2 is only beginning. The next step that's going to happen to the tobacco industry is they're going to have a full track and trace with every tobacco product, because they want to dry out the gray market coming from other European countries and even abroad. So every single tobacco product has to be completely traceable along the process of the value chain. So yeah, so you better get your legal team ready. And even though it's going to be tough to say which of the regulations will be, also facing the cannabis industry, if you see something in like neighboring industries that you don't like, you have to do lobbying work against it now, because once it is in writing, it's going to be very hard to fight it. The second thing I want to talk about is a little bit the stigma of the industry, because all the cigar smokers, I get the same thing. When I tell people that I'm in the cigar industry, they're all like, you don't look like somebody who smokes cigars. It's like, okay, so why is that? Because they have an image in their head of, Gordon Gekko type of business tycoon, or the other picture is my granddad, he used to smoke cigars. And of course with cannabis it's the same, all users are a bunch of stoners, even though I see Tommy Chong's brand out there, so it's really awesome, so stoners get business people at some time. Or the drug addicts, right? This is like the stigma. It's like my dad, when I told him that I'm going to a cannabis event, he's like, oh, that's okay, as long as you don't start smoking it. And it's like, And I'm not immune to this, I'm not immune to this. I remember my first cannabis show, I was like, well, they have kids here. But if this had been a wine event, like a wine festival, it's completely normal to bring your family, right? So it's So this is what I mean with that. Obviously, once you go down the road of full legalization, you get a vast variety of products that are coming in, and thus it means that you're going to have to build a brand, because all the tobacco products that we have in the market right now in Europe and around the globe, they're not sold by product quality. It is because the product quality is really hard to assess for a consumer. It is really hard, and I always say, well, if you go to like wine tastings, like 65% of what is talked there is just pure bullshit. Well, like in tobacco industry, it's like 95%, and cannabis is somewhere in between. So brand is that what will differentiate you. You will sell your product not about the product quality, because people will have a binary decision about it. They like it or they don't like it. They like it maybe better. It works for them and it helps them, or it doesn't help them. It helps better than another product. So it's always like a binary decision that's involved in this. And the brand is actually the cognitive anchor that helps, transporting that. So they're going to buy something because they like the story, because they like the design, because they like the persona that represents that brand. And this is something that we use when we brought new tobacco products, new cigars into the market for positioning. It's just an example. But when we talk about product quality, obviously, we should take a step back, because quality, when we look at any definition, it always says that it's measured, one thing is measured against something else. And what we measure is our expectations versus what we perceive of that product or service. So that's the thing that's, first of all, what is important is it's never constant, because, perception, expectations, they will change, and they can even change from something that you don't even have in the realm of your own control. So it can be that you have a perfectly good quality product, but your competition raises quality, all of a sudden your product is just good or okay. So you have to work with this, and quality is like the beginning of everything, and the entire loyalty value chain, if you want to put it this way. Because if you take your perceived quality and measure it against the cost of attaining a product or service, you will come up with something that's called value. If your value, the perceived value, is higher or equal to what you expected, you'll be satisfied. If not, you're not going to be satisfied. If you're satisfied over a longer period of time, then you develop trust, which will mean that you have a positive idea about the future outcome of that relationship that you have. On top of that, this will develop into repetitive behavior and finally repeat purchase, and you eventually, all these factor in, will become loyalty, which means that you will become an advocate to that brand, and that's something that everybody in this room hopefully wants to achieve, be in the B2B or B2C setting. When we talk about cannabis quality, of course, there's some things how we can assess cannabis quality. I mean, cannabinoid terpene profile is one thing that we know. Water activity is actually a metric that is super important in food safety today in all the food-related industries, and we're just beginning today to talk about it when it comes to cannabis. And of course, contamination, or hopefully lack thereof, this is all things that we can measure. And water activity, which would translate to the free or unbound water within a plant. So that's the stuff that's going to evaporate first, or that's the stuff that's going to be available for biochemical reactions. We need this all along the value chain, right? This is a curing barn from a tobacco plant. So tobacco, how you produce it and proceed is you dry it, then you cure it. It's called fermentation in that pack. And then you store it. That's pretty much like cannabis, right? But the fermentation takes sometimes years for tobacco. And the one difference is that every retailer in the world that sells premium cigars will store their products at a humidity-controlled, a place or storage or whatever that is. And the same is true for consumers, because they know that they're going to have a bad product experience when the product is too dry, or that they will lose everything to mold when the product is too moist. So for cannabis, we have the same effect, but not that many people know. Consumers, they don't know anything about it. In the industry now, we're starting to discuss it, and it's not only because, dry flower also means light flower, right? So everything is really attached to water activity in the plant, because we have to remember that we have a plant that's in decay, so we cut it from its nutrients, it's beginning to die. And some of the processes, and they're all tied to the water activity level in the plant, some of the processes are highly wanted, we call it curing, and some, especially towards the higher end of that segment, we basically don't want, because we don't want to lose everything to mold. So this is why we need a maximum level of water activity as a quality standard in today's cannabis industry looking into the future. And the maximum level is around 0.65 of water activity. There you go. Told ya. But we also need a minimum standard. So what we did is we took cannabis flowers into a lab for a pilot study. We put it into a closed container for 6 weeks and measured the cannabinoid terpene profile before and after. And we found an average loss of 15% of terpenes and cannabinoids over that short period of time in a sealed container, I have to say. So what happens, if you know a little bit the biochemical compounds, you see that these are pretty robust little things usually. So they don't decay that easily. But what happens is that your plant dries down and the trichomes on your plant, they simply break off when you're too dry. This effect is being magnified when you stir it, shake it. So once you start shipping flower from Canada into Europe, from Israel into Europe, from, I don't know, Colombia into wherever, you run the risk of losing that, especially nowadays. You all probably heard, everybody likes these Mylar bags because they're so handy, but it's impossible to keep out of the little corners and niches. You just lose it, let's face it. And you can avoid it by having a humidity control with your cannabis along the way. This is probably the most sold prescription that we have in Central Europe by Bedrocan, and even this container is leaking about 6 milligrams of water per day in dry conditions. Which will mean that with the 5 gram dosage that we have here, the difference between, let's say, 0.62 water activity and 0.55, where you start losing your trichomes, is basically just 100 milligrams. So you have not even 3 weeks in a worst case scenario where you start losing some of the medicinal value of that plant. So humidification control device, or technology would be an obvious, reply to that problem. And they're made of like 3 components. One is water, because if you want to rehumidifize something, you need water in that mix. There's a controlling agent. This could be right now the predominant the factors are salt or glycerin. And there's a membrane that would just let the water pass and would keep the controlling agent inside of whatever you're going to use. And I want to just give you like a really quick rundown of these 2 technologies. What we have here is a salt and water mix. It's actually set to 62% relative humidity, and this can actually lose up to 1/3 of its weight before you actually start going below that 0.55 mark. With glycerin, you're going to get to that point really fast at just about 2% weight loss. So you have all this red area there, and to be fair, the graph below really ends just at the half of what the graph above is. So why is that so? It's because when you use salt, you have the unfair advantage of using different salts that have different deliquescence points. So that's like a breaking point where any salt goes from solid into fluid states, and above and below which the salt would change from absorbing water to releasing water again. It's like when you go to a restaurant, you have salt on the table, and if you don't add rice or anything in there, it will get really clumpy. So it would attract the humidity, but it will also dry out again, So this is, and we take advantage of this. With glycerin, it's not the same. You have only one glycerin compound, and you can achieve different humidity levels just by adding or removing moisture from that very same mix, which means that once you have one of those packs activated, it will simply create an equilibrium between the pack itself and the biomass that you're trying to humidify or to dry down. So it will never stay at 62, it will be somewhere in between. If you add this to like moist conditions, you can, it will continue to take on the excess humidity, and you can easily grow mold. And if it dries down, you can go into in the red area again as well. So it's really about protecting your craft. And I always compare it to riding a motorcycle. You can ride a motorcycle without a helmet, but it's really stupid. But you can, and even a cheap motorcycle helmet is better than no helmet. But if you really care of what's inside your helmet, then you should use a salt-based humidity agent. And there's a company named BOVEDA who has a patent on the salt-based humidity. Just saying, just putting it out there. So this is why we choose salt over glycerin. It's because it's much more performant. But it's not only about product quality, of course. It's about the top line revenue on top of that. Because, and if you only want the snapshot of one chart, is probably this one. Because we just what we wrote down how much money you actually lose from drying your buds on a pound of cannabis. This is how much money you can lose when you dry it down too much. And if you know that the only thing you have to do is add a little pouch with a value of cents to the dollar, I just leave it there. the last thing I want to talk about is something that I call big corporations, because everybody, of course, loves big corporations and I do too. I'm not against it because they bring so much value to the marketplace, and with their own level of professionalism and the marketing power, that they pave the way into the mainstream, and that's the way it is. And it's good. But I just want to share like a last story with you that even these guys have their own agenda. For instance, in the cigar industry in the United States, a couple of years ago, the FDA came up with a new ruling when it comes to introducing new products into the market. They have to go through extensive lab testing all of a sudden. And this is a lengthy and very costly process. And you would think that especially companies with a large number of SKUs, they would fight against it, but they didn't. And this is because they figured out that while they have the power actually of, oh, it's 420, should light one up. So. Why not? So when the so they didn't fight because they found out basically that it's probably easier for them, just to let the small companies die or reduce their rate of bringing new products into the market than because they have the money to afford the process, other companies don't. So they did nothing. So you should support the activists right away. There are different lobbying groups. Don't mind if I do. Different lobbying groups that you can support right now in Europe, and you should do it right away from scratch. And there are many ways you can be creative. I have a friend who is a Jewish baker out of Florida, and he teamed up with a Muslim farmer. He's growing ornamental flowers. And they're getting ready to go for a growth license once Florida goes online. And he's really using his religious community, in order to put pressure onto decision makers in this lawmaking process in Florida, literally telling them, you're going to be hunted down by a bunch of angry rabbis, and you don't want this. So I can't really help you with this, guys. I'm not a Catholic. But I'm going to leave you with that nice image here and a bright futures for all of us. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Let's hear it again. We have time for one or two questions if anybody has any questions. Anyone? No questions, not even like, hey, can I get a hit of your vaporizer? Or no? All right.
Wait, I got a question.
Alex has a question.
So what do you think the main, I actually didn't see your entire presentation, maybe you covered it, Benny. What I did see was very good. Thank you very much for being here, dude.
Pleasure.
What do you think the main the main crossover point for cannabis and your industry is? And are there any other industries that's an analogy or compared it to?
Well, the main crossover point for Europe is that people spool here like crazy, so you mix tobacco with cannabis, but that's it for recreational. The other thing is that, for me, it's really the different types of regulations that could possibly come into play. And this is, I don't know if you saw that part, but this is, I spoke about it just a little bit, and you will have to know that this is going to be a heavily regulated industry no matter what. Even we will be granting like broad access to the product. It will not be easy. My best educated guess right now that it will be available through pharmacies, for Germany at least, because we have a very elaborate system, and they know how to store and blah, blah. So, but we don't know. And it's all, it's all up to us and lobbying groups, like Deutsche Handverband and Georg, the guys are making great progress here. So we have to support them now in order to move it into the right direction, so.
And do you think that...
You speaking the mic?
Sorry. And so when Germany goes rec, do you see that maybe? Do you ever see cannabis not being sold in pharmacies in Germany, or maybe some type of social club model in the more progressive northern cities like Köln, Hamburg, Berlin?
Well, in Berlin, they try to do it. Do you
think that could ever get legs?
It could be. It really comes down to our leadership, which is right now very conservative in Germany. We talk about Germany. It's very conservative leadership. Once there's a shift, and the old people will die eventually, at some point. But apart from that, if that changes, I think everything could be possible. You know, if everything is possible. I don't think they're going to make the same mistakes that they did with tobacco. You know, they want to avoid it. Tobacco is just so widely available, so they have to put all the warning labels and shock images in place to keep people from buying it. At the same time, they make so much money out of it that they won't go into prohibition, you know, because people would go crazy and they earn a shitload of money out of it. So it would be something in between tobacco and the pharmacy model. That would be my way of thinking. Yeah.
Do you think there will be some tolerance allowed when it comes to that social club model? Do you think it'll be kind of this kind of quasi little underground thing? Do you think that culturally that's possible?
No.
Or Spain, or like they do in Spain, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that
Amsterdam,
Spain,
for that matter.
Yeah, I don't think that Spain is going to be modeled for Germany because that's not how Germans are. You know, because
I don't either.
You
think there is something there, though?
No, I don't see it. I see it's going to be in a controlled environment because the social clubs that you see in Spain, they're out of reach for everybody. You know, it's like the police would go in there, eventually try to get a hold, but they can't because it's all covered. You know, and Germany would not let this happen, especially since you have they would look abroad like everybody else would do. You look abroad in different industries, into different countries, and they will see what's happening in Spain. You know, and you still have a large black market, even though you have the model right there, right? So it's coffee shop, yeah. So if you maybe we have special dispensaries, but why shouldn't the special dispensary be just a pharmacy? I don't, you know.
Thank you again very much. Let's hear it again for Ben Patock.